What does a prophet do? First of all, we have to understand that if you're a prophet, you don't choose to be a prophet. It's not something, when you're a child, you say, when I grow up, I'm going to be a prophet. Do you choose to be a prophet? When I finish high school, hey, what do you want to be when you finish school? When you graduate? I want to be a prophet.
Get a degree.
I want to get a degree in prophecy. Do you study to become a prophet? Isn't that great, a degree in prophecy? Do you study to become a prophet? No. Do you choose to become a prophet? No. According to the ancient mind, it's involuntary. You don't choose to be it. Who chooses you to be a prophet? God chooses you. In fact, we have the story of many prophets, as we're going to see. It's like, wait a minute, you must be talking to the wrong person. You got the wrong person here. Right? Jeremiah. When God calls Jeremiah, Jeremiah says, ooh, sorry, I think you got the wrong number. Right? Click. Hangs up on God. No, it's God who calls. Another point that's important to understand is that prophets are inspired, simply meaning that when a prophet speaks, a prophet's not talking their own words. If Vincent is a prophet, then our challenge becomes, how do we distinguish between Vincent the human being and Vincent the prophet? Follow me? How do we know when it's Vincent speaking? And how do we know when God is speaking through Vincent? How's that for a challenge? We're going to come back to that a little later this evening, only because we're going to find different instances where we see prophets speaking, and sometimes it's more like the human being speaking, and other times, well, that sounds like God speaking. Follow me? How do we distinguish between what's coming from Vincent and what's coming from God?
So Moses, he was a prophet.
Moses was a prophet.
I mean, I've heard things throughout this there. Yeah, Moses is a prophet because I've heard that he's a prophet. But other religions say he's the one that maybe the Messiah. But to us, he's a prophet. So how do we distinguish that?
Excellent question. Let's use the example of Jesus, right? In our course on Christology, okay, we just said that people thought Jesus was a prophet. Who do you say that I am? Some people say that you're the prophet. Oh. Remember we said that he was perhaps the eschatological prophet? How do you distinguish? Was Jesus a prophet and or was Jesus the Messiah? How do you figure these things out? Who's talking here? Is it Vincent who's talking? Or is Vincent a prophet where God is talking through him? Or is Vincent the Messiah who's come to save and set us free? Who's talking? Moses. Who is Moses? Jesus. Who's Jesus? Any one of us. How do we know when it's the person who's speaking? How do we know when God is speaking through that person? Some prophets were ecstatics. What does that mean that they were ecstatic? Actually, before we get to that, let's go back to that word inspired. To say that a prophet is inspired, think about the root of that word for a moment. Inspire. That comes from the same root as the English word spirit, which means what? That if you're in spirit, if you're inspired, what is inside you? The Spirit. How interesting. So that if you're inspired, if you are a prophet who is inspired by God, that means that God's Spirit is in you and is speaking through you. The Greeks had a different word. This is the Latin word for it. The word, interestingly, the word respiration comes from all this too, right? Respiration. What happens when we what's the word? Respirate? When we respirate, what's happening? We breathe in. For the ancients, breath was a life-giving force. That's why when we say the Holy Spirit, we translate it as spirit, but for them it was the ruach in Hebrew, the breath, the holy breath. We breathe in this holy breath. It fills us with life, and then we breathe it out. When a person dies, what's the polite word that we use in the medical scene? That person expired, which means what? That the spirit went out of that person. Interesting. So the prophets are inspired. They have the Spirit within them. The Greeks used the different word. The English word that we have is enthusiasm. Say what? Enthusiasm. And in. Thus. Do you remember the Greek word theos? Theology. the word for God. Enthused, we originally used the word enthused or enthusiasm to mean that God is in that person. Father Jamie is such an enthusiastic person. What did that mean in the original Greek? That God was in that person. Enthusiasm. So that brings us to this notion of ecstasy then. Follow me now. When we talk about ecstasy, what we believe that was that certain people were in such communion with God that they were in ecstasy. So that some of these prophets in the ancient Near East, some of the prophets were ecstatics, meaning that some of them went into an ecstasy and delivered their message while they were in ecstasy, and others weren't. Boy, this only adds to the confusion of trying to figure out whether the word is coming from God or not. Because we see Vincent meditating and meditating and meditating at the top of the mountain and going into ecstasy, and then saying whatever it is that he's saying. Follow me? Some prophets were ecstatics. They were in ecstasy when they were getting these things. And others were not. Predicting the future might reinforce a prophet's authority, but did you have to predict the future in order to be a prophet? No. Prophets don't always predict the future. But predicting the future could be the sign of a prophet. Follow me? If you're a prophet, you don't have to predict the future, but predicting the future could be a sign that you're a prophet. If Vincent tells us what's going to happen in the future, and it happens, then it could be a sign that he's a prophet. But if he's a prophet, he doesn't have to tell us the future. Prophets don't necessarily look into the future, but looking into the future could be a sign of the prophet. Think again about the consequences. If Vincent tells me that I'm going to die at 9:21 this evening, there are two possible outcomes. I'm dead at 9:21, or I'm still alive at 9:22. What does that mean? If I'm still alive, that means that Vincent then is not a true prophet. Dangerous. Vincent, be careful before you start predicting the future. Right? So, how do we start knowing the false prophets from the true prophets? How's that for a question now? Now that we know that the room is filled with prophets, how do we know the true prophets from the false prophets? Some easy tests in the book of Deuteronomy. The pragmatic test is, does what the prophet says actually happen? If Vincent says something and it happens, that could be a sign that he's a prophet. Caution, though, in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel suggests that God could deceive prophets. Think about the trick that's inherent in this one now. We believe that Vincent is a prophet. What is Ezekiel telling us? That God could be deceiving him and us. The book of Jeremiah tells us that a true prophet doesn't give comfort when there's no basis for it. Right? That a prophet sometimes has to say some uncomfortable things. And if you're a prophet, you can't just say that everything is nice and rosy if things aren't. Follow me? True prophets, says Jeremiah, are moral and not godless, which is why this course provides the foundation for a later course in morality. Right? How it is that we should live. The prophets have to live that way. Right? If we believe that God says we have to live a certain way, what does that mean for the prophet? Got news for you, Vincent. If you say that God says we have to live a certain way, then you have to live that way too. Why can prophets not be godless? Isn't that a sort of contradiction? A godless prophet? Who speaks through the prophets? God. So how can you be a godless prophet? Right? So that's from the book of Jeremiah. The prophets are moral and not godless. And then finally, Ezekiel also tells us that false prophets prophesy out of their imaginations. They mislead people and give them false hope. So, I'm a king. I have two people telling me two different things. Deacon Cleophas, what do you say? Should I go to battle? He says, Father, got news for you. Don't go out to battle. Gonna lose. Whew. I'm I'm not sure I like Deacon Cleophas's prophecy. I'm going to go to Vincent. Vincent, what do you say? I'm thinking of going out to battle. Should I go out to battle? Vincent says, go out to battle. God is on your side. You're going to win. What just happened here? I listened to the prophet I wanted to listen to. In this case, I go out to battle and I lose. What does that mean? Wait a minute. Right? False. It's 9:21. It's over. Game over. Right? What does it mean for these prophets? Whether I win or lose, I lost the battle. Does that mean that Deacon Cleophas was right? And or what does that mean for Vincent, who told me, yeah, go on? Jeremiah says it's the false prophets who prophesy out of their imaginations. Thank you, Vincent, for hoping that we win, and for encouraging us, and for giving us that false hope that we win. But the people who lost their lives in that battle, they're not thanking you right now. It was a tough job to be a prophet, you follow me? Tough job to be a prophet. To be God's mouthpiece, God's spokesperson, God's voice in this world, saying things that people might not want to hear. That was a tough job.